Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. And this podcast begins at the beginning, because while you might want to cross the finish line, you can't get there without starting.
Thank you. I don't know if you're doing this movie or you're doing an NPR podcast, maybe of some kind.
maybe this it would have been that nowadays, right? Like this could have been a 6-part limited podcast about Sarah Polley exploring her family roots.
Yeah, it probably could or would have, but I think it works really well in the form that it's in. And we'll talk about that because in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we are talking about the films of 2012. And in this episode, we are talking about our documentary pick, which is Sarah Polley's Stories We Tell, her exploration of her family roots and her own parentage that features some startling revelations about her origins that will just spoil, I suppose.
I mean, it's, again, 10 years
Sure.
old
No,
at least. So, you know, if we're not spoiler averse on
No,
this
no,
podcast.
we're not. It was interesting reading the reviews of this, like seeing some of them were very, very coy about what is really going on in this film and saying that, you know, you should discover it for yourself. And others were completely revealed everything that has happened in this movie, and which apparently, I don't remember this at the time, but apparently there were some news stories, especially because this movie started by premiering at a bunch of different film festivals, so that by the time it came out in wider release, there were a lot of reports already about the revelations in the film. So it was interesting to me to see that, though.
Well, I mean, there was even in the movie, they talk about the article that was written where they reveal what's being revealed in the movie, you know?
Well, she talks about a reporter and she begged him not to report it. And I think that actually worked. Like, it wasn't reported before the movie was started to be shown at festivals.
Okay. Well, either way, I'm glad that the first time I saw this, did not know the reveal. I think had I known it, I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much. And I say that because I had seen this already. And while I still like this movie, this is one of those movies that can't recreate the impact of when you watch it for the first time.
Yeah, and I feel like I almost had the opposite reaction that you did. Not necessarily about the big reveal, which, I mean, we can say the reveal, which is that Sarah Polley, the man that she grew up with as her father, is not her biological father. And her mother had an affair with a man who is, in fact, her father.
Right. But as we go throughout this story, we think it might be this person, and then it turns out to be another person, and then turns out, so there's a few twists and turns in there.
Yeah, and so I will say a few things. One, not hate is the wrong word, but I have become more and more frustrated with documentaries that have twists. And I feel like that's not necessarily the best way to present your documentary filmmaking. So I kind of liked better knowing what was going on. And the other way that this movie kind of plays with the audience is that there's all this footage that looks like home videos of Sarah Polley's family. And the vast majority is not really. It is recreations. And not knowing that the first time when it is made clear toward the end of the movie really annoyed me. And I feel like I like the movie a lot more now, knowing that, hey, these are recreations, and that's okay that they're recreations. Like, lots of documentaries have reenactments and recreations and whatever. It's no problem. But the fact that she kind of obscures that is annoying. And so knowing it going in, I felt like I could focus more on the film itself. So I liked it more this time, actually.
You know, this is just classic Josh. I don't like stories where they try to do something that I don't like that they're doing, you know. Just telling the story in her own way. It's a dramatic reenactment. I have no problem with that. She's trying to grab the emotional crux. And I'm going to disagree with you on documentaries with twists. If the twist works, then let's go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem, like I said, with the idea of having dramatic reenactments. I'm just not sure why she has to obscure that that's what's going on. And there is definitely like a big reveal. You can't really argue that she's like, oh, well, I thought everyone would realize that it's dramatic reenactments. Because oftentimes in documentaries, when we have reenactments, it's very clear and you don't have to put a label on it. But she has this moment where she pulls back and shows the filming of the reenactments that's clearly meant to be like a big reveal. So she knows that it's going to be a surprise to people. And I found that unnecessary and distracting from the story that she's trying to tell.
None of it. I mean, again, it was all to how do you make it resonate emotionally. And the story, as you're using the word obscure, is obscured by so many different elements anyway. Like I said, we think it might be this person, and then it turns out to be another person. That I feel like it all adds up here. I have no problem with any of these things.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I liked it a lot this time because I knew those things. I think it really, I could focus more on the emotions of it, which are really powerful, that she's going through and that all the other people are going through. And the reenactments are good, but I think I was able to, rather than trying to like figure something out, which is not what I'm watching a documentary for, I just was immersed in the family dynamic.
I mean, Josh, her mom died so young. I mean, she had to do something here to showcase her mom and that character. And obviously, footage wasn't there. So she utilized these visuals along with the recorded stories of others to kind of create a fuller picture of the person.
Right. And again, I don't have an issue with any of that. My issue is just the obscuring of what's going on, the deliberate tricking of the audience for no purpose that, to me, enhances the story of the film.
I guess that never even entered my mind. I always, maybe because I had seen it before, I always knew they were reenactments. So I never thought she was trying to trick me at all. I just thought she was, trying to do something to elevate her storytelling. And Josh, this is a story she tells.
It is. And yeah, of course, this time I knew that they were reenactments. And that's what I'm saying is that with that knowledge, I appreciated the movie more. So, well, we're kind of getting into some real detail here, but we can step back and note that
you want no detail in this podcast.
No. I think we can get into all this more later. But start off as we usually do, looking at how this movie was received when it came out. It grossed 1.3.
Well, that would make sense, Josh, because we do have to start at the start.
Right. As you said at the beginning of this podcast, that is where we have to start. So this movie grossed $1.3 million at the box office. I didn't see what its budget was, and a lot of that may not be available. She worked on this for 5 years, and a lot of it is just personal interactions with people, maybe financed in part by herself. Personally, I don't know. But I mean, that's a decent amount for what is really a niche kind of film. It premiered at the Venice Film Festival in 2012 and played a bunch of other film festivals, including Toronto, of course, which is her hometown. It was shortlisted for the Best Documentary Feature Film Oscar, but it was not nominated. I was kind of surprised because this was such a highly acclaimed film that I don't know why it didn't make the cut for the Oscars, but it did not.
I'm going to look that up right now. So the best documentary, was, wow, what a year for documentaries. The best documentary was Searching for Sugar Man, which is amazing. And I actually campaigned for us to cover that in this season, which we did not. So our search for Sugar Man will have to continue. But, Kirby Dick and Amy Ziering had The Invisible War. Then there was How to Survive a Plague, The Gatekeepers, and 5 Broken Cameras. I'm not familiar with those other 3, but I mean, we knew Jiro, Dreams of Sushi. That didn't make it either into this best documentary feature of the year. So the Academy Oscars, so lame.
Well, I think I agree with you that Searching for Sugar Man is a very good film. And I haven't seen those others either, but I think there are several of those that are very topical and sort of social issue oriented, which seems like where the Oscars put their focus documentary wise a lot. So maybe that was one of the things. This is a personal film. It's not about a current event. It's not about a hot button political issue or whatever. So it doesn't attract as much attention as other movies like that. But obviously neither is Searching for Sugar Man and managed to win. So I feel like it could have gotten a spot in there somewhere.
Yeah, and I would say Jiro also should have gotten a spot in there.
Yeah.
So, if we ever reboot the Oscars of 2013, Josh, these are changes we can make.
Yeah, let's do it. This movie was highly acclaimed by critics as well. Manohla Dargis in the New York Times said, Stories We Tell has a number of transparent virtues, including its humor and formal design, although its most admirable quality is the deep sense of personal ethics that frames Ms. Polley's filmmaking choices. Although it touches on intimate points, many recounted by Michael Polley in voiceover, the movie is revelatory rather than exploitative. And while the movie finally proves as much an autobiographical tale as a biographical one, Ms. Polley resists turning it into a flattering self-portrait of a young artist in search of her origins. Instead, building on the interest in narrative form that she expressed in earlier movies like Take This Waltz, she explores storytelling itself and the space between a life lived and its different, at times conflicting representations.
Well, what's interesting there to me is like she comes from this family of artists, right? Like both of her parents were actors, and her mom had a casting business, and her dad is a writer who often found it hard to write. And yeah, there is something to this idea of playing with how do you tell a story. And in this case, weaving it in a different way is important because it is not your traditional nuclear family. So I like that. And I think he is obviously a talented actor, but he's really good with, when he's reading his chapter in verse, the story that he's written. Michael is a very good narrator.
Yeah, he is. I mean, and he has that kind of poshish, I don't know if that's the right word for it, but his British accent feels very authoritative, the kind of voice you would expect to read you an audiobook or something like that. And that definitely does come across. And I mean, I agree with this review that it's not a self-aggrandizing movie. I wonder if she almost goes too far in that other direction, if she was concerned about it potentially coming off that way or narcissistic. There were times when I was hoping for more of her reaction. She gets so much emotional openness from all of her family members. And when they're talking about certain things that would have affected her deeply, we don't really get her voice and her response to how that would have felt. And that was maybe a little frustrating to me at times.
Yeah. And I also think, literally, I think maybe every interview here is a single, right? It's all done in singles.
Yeah.
It might have been good to have her on camera with some of her subjects. So there could have been a back and forth that was focused on both of them as opposed to just her asking questions. Like, so we could have gotten that opinion with another character kind of inviting her into the conversation as opposed to just her leading every conversation.
Right, I think so. And there are moments where the interviewees kind of ask her something or speculate about something to her, and she generally doesn't show what her response would have been there. So, yeah, that was a little frustrating, and I think it could very well be that she was concerned about like, oh, I'm a famous person and this could end up looking like it's all about me and I don't want it to be like that, but she maybe moved a little too far in the other
I
direction.
mean, the movie's called and I'm with you. I think it's called Stories We Tell, and she's telling the story of her family. So she is and it all really revolves around her,
Right.
and her mom and her dad's. So like she is a central character. So I think that including herself here would have been beneficial as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, and it's interesting again. So here, Manohla Dargis, she makes great pains in that New York Times review to not tell you what the movie is really about and not reveal any of the secrets. And then I thought it would be good to get a Canadian review. And
Eh?
so Peter Howell in the Toronto Star lays out all the details already because, of course, Sarah Polley, much more famous in Canada. And so this was already like a big news story that they had reported about before doing the movie review. So I didn't include that excerpt, but he does give you every single detail of the real events that the movie lays out. And so in terms of the movie quality, he says, Stories We Tell makes, quote, documentary seem the most limiting of labels. Sarah Polley's brave quest to uncover her family's deepest secrets unfolds like a thriller, one where the resolution is literally part of her DNA. It's an intimate story of truth, memory, and reconciliation, not just for Polley and her family, but also for astonished viewers. Polley's personal documentary is extraordinary in every way, from its postmodern structure to the raw emotion of its carefully revealed family secrets. Stories We Tell is as direct as a blood transfusion. It's a film of fact, remembrance, and forgiveness with no clear path. You just have to trust in Sarah Polley's steely determination and follow her relentless lens.
So, did you? I mean, and it's just maybe this just triggered that is like, you know, she has this family she grew up with. Then she finds out someone else is her dad, and she kind of creates relationships with those members of that side of the family. But I think it would have been interesting also to explore once this is all out in the open, even one scene, like, do these two families come together? Do they all get along? Do they spend holidays together? What is the relationship with all the surrounding characters, not just her?
Right. Yeah, you do wonder about that. I mean, we meet the wife of her biological father and his one daughter that she has met with as well, and they all seem enthusiastic about embracing her as part of their family. But you're right. Where is the bigger dynamic in there? We don't really know. And one of the big things in this film is how sort of open and generous her father, Michael, who raised her, is about this whole situation. And he isn't angry. And in fact, he's as fascinated as she is. So, do he and the biological father get along? The biological father seems a lot less interested in being part of that. So you're right. It's something that's not really explored.
And then that's where I go back to like having, maybe more than one person in the interview at one time. Imagine if you had Michael and Harry interviewed together. Wouldn't have it been great to see that dynamic?
Right. I mean, and maybe part of what she's trying to do is not manufacture conflict and for the sake of cinematic drama or whatever. And I understand that again, something like that could seem like it's more exploitative, but you're also right that there's a certain dynamic that's missing there.
Yeah, well, what she did was record all of the interviews separately before she figured out the form of the documentary, right? So she kind of went and she interviewed, her brother or one of her sisters, and then she did the dad and then the other dad, whatever. So she had this all logged, and then she put together the backbone. And I think maybe she stuck a little too much to that as opposed to like, now that I have this and I figure this out, let me go back and do more interviews in different ways. That said, we both like the movie. So,
right. No, it is still very good. And I mean, it's hard to criticize somebody for the form in which they present this like very, very personal, like deep
how they want to reveal. How dare you reveal to me who is your biological father in this way?
Yeah. So there was a bit of criticism, and I thought I'd get a little of that, even though overwhelmingly the reviews were positive. So Stephen Whitty in the Newark Star Ledger said, Polley continues to grow as a director. The film has some subtle and very intuitive editing, yet it remains too much of an insider's story. Sarah Polley's relationship to the people she interviews isn't always made clear. Footage we accept as being real turns out, near the end of the movie, to have been faked. We remain the outsiders at a family get-together, never quite getting the jokes or the references. Polley is a good filmmaker, but in the end, Stories We Tell feels less like a film than a family album, and one best appreciated not by us, but by the Polleys still to come.
Well, it's a tough one for me. I'm not on board with that review there. And anyway, I've already explained why it doesn't bother me that, we had these reenactments. And I feel like, I mean, she's basically saying, I wish she would tell this personal story in a less personal way. And I don't know how, I mean, I think what we're talking about is we want her to even tell it in a more personal way. So I just, I'm not feeling it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like, other than our disagreement about the reenactments, I don't necessarily agree with what he's saying either. I just wanted, that perspective. I will say his criticism when he says her relationships to the people being interviewed isn't always clear. I think it mostly is made clear, but that it is also kind of not introduced clearly at the start. She puts a title card with each person with their name, but just their first name and nothing about her relationship. And over time, you get it. But one person, like, for example, I said her biological father, his wife is one of the interviewees. Maybe I missed something, but throughout, I was like, who is this person? And I wasn't sure, is she his wife? Is she his sister? She's clearly someone with a personal connection to him, but I wasn't sure who she was. And it was only looking at the credits that I connected who she was. So that is maybe a little frustrating, but it's also part of what Sarah Polley is doing, where she's not just going to hold your hand through every little thing.
Right. And I only connected that it was his wife when you said it was his wife.
Right. Okay. So I'm not the only one there. But I mean, I will also say that at like film festivals and stuff, I have seen a lot of documentaries that really feel like someone's random ass home movies that they just threw together and put on the screen. And having watched movies like that, this movie is so much better. And that making a personal story is a great thing to do in a documentary. But I think you need to be able to structure it in a way that engages your audience. And that's what she does here. The editing in this film is fantastic. The way that it's paced, all of that is really, really good. And it really involves you, even though it's a story about these people that you've never met.
Right. And I said, when I used the terms more personal, that's probably not right. It's probably other ways of telling the personal story in equally as personal terms. Like, so that's what we're talking about, just kind of enhancing what on the track she's already on there.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't disagree with you that being more personal can be a good thing. And I think specificity is good. I don't want her, she could have easily, instead of doing what she did, made a movie where it starts with her saying, hey, I learned that my biological father was not the man that I grew up thinking was my father. How interesting is that? Let's make a documentary about people who have met their biological parents or something. And that would have been like a boring news report. It's better because it's specific, because she has personal investment in what she's doing.
That we agree on, good sir.
All right. So, I mean, I think we've gone over here that clearly we both had seen this movie before. I'm pretty sure I saw it in the theater, or at least when it was released on home video right after it came out in the theater. And because it was a big documentary that year that a lot of people were talking about, really in 2013 by the time it got a commercial release here in the US. But was that when you saw it as well, Jason?
No, this was definitely on my radar when it was theatrical. I was like, oh, what a cool looking, indie doc. And it took me years to kind of just get around to it. And then I was really blown away by it the first time. And like I said, I don't think I had it didn't resonate the same. I still like it a lot. I just think like the first time you hear this story, for me anyway, is the time where it has the most emotional impact.
Right. And I can understand that. But, like I said, for me, it was strangely the opposite. But I liked it both times, definitely. So, Dave, had you seen this before?
I had not. I had heard great things about it. But yeah, no, this is my first time and I liked it.
Yeah. All right. Cool. And Jason, you had not seen any Sarah Polley films before this, right?
This is I've seen movies she's acted in, of course.
Right. But films that she's directed.
Right. So, there's only 3 others, right? There's Away From Her was her first one, I think, and then Take This Waltz. And then at the time of recording, for some reason, her current film, Women Talking, is nominated both for Best Picture and Best Screenplay. And I'm not trying to dog that movie, but I feel like this new woke Oscars is sometimes a little too woke with what they're nominating. Like, I don't see how it gets either of those nominations.
I wasn't a fan of that movie either, but I think it's a crutch to say that, quote, wokeness is the reason for these things being nominated. It's the same with the Sight and Sound list that we talked about extensively last season related to Tokyo Story, but that's maybe something to talk about for the legacy.
Yeah, I would like your opinion because, like, I don't know why this got in.
I mean, the reason it got in was because a bunch of people thought it was really good and we didn't. And that is the end of the story.
Did they? Did they, Josh?
Yes, they did.
Anyway, interesting, because a bunch of people thought The Woman King was really good and that didn't get in. So you want to get into that?
I mean, there are a number, it's a numbers game. It's statistically more people voted for this one than voted for that one. And that was why this was nominated and that wasn't. That's how
interesting.
It
works. What we're woke on and what we're not woke on.
Or what people liked more passionately than they liked other things.
You're saying more people were passionate about Women Talking than The Woman King?
I'm saying more people in the Academy voted for Women Talking on a higher level than they voted for the Woman King, and that's how
Yes, I
nominations work.
understand how the nominations work. I'm
Because
talking
they
about the
thought-
subtext of the nominations. I don't take it for the face value that it is.
I think, yes, that more people liked women talking at a higher level amongst all the movies that were released this year than people who liked The Woman King at that level because of ranked choice voting, which I believe is how the nominations work. I think to like categorize levels of wokeness is missing the entire point of all of this.
And I'm shocked that you, a critic, would defend an awards body. That's just so crazy.
I'm not defending, again, I didn't like women talking, nor in fact did I like The Woman King. I'm not saying that these are movies that are the best of the year. I'm not saying they're my favorites. I'm not saying that they're better than other movies that weren't nominated. I'm saying that I am willing to believe that the people who voted for them genuinely liked them. That's all.
I thought She Said was better than both of those movies. So.
I didn't see She Said. So anyway, this is way
Ooh,
off topic.
Boy,
But,
that got heated. We're
no,
just a bunch of men talking. Who wants that?
That's the new title of our podcast.
Yeah.
Men talking.
Yeah.
So I mean,
we're going to be huge in Bohemian Grove. That new title.
Getting back to Stories We Tell, is there anything else on the background of this film you want to talk about?
Yeah, Josh, didn't it win the Toronto Film Festival named it one of the top 10 Canadian films of all time. Let's talk about that, Josh. What are your top 10 Canadian films of all time?
I don't know. Maybe another movie Sarah Polley was in, The Sweet Hereafter. Isn't she in that? And that Adam McGoyan film. That's a really good Canadian movie.
Yeah.
Or
I mean, dude.
Every David Cronenberg movie? I don't know.
We do have another Canadian movie coming up later in this season. Hint, hint.
We already talked about a Canadian movie earlier in this season. I guess this is a big Canadian season for us.
I don't even remember what that was.
This is Antiviral, the Brandon Cronenberg film.
What a trend. Canada's finally breaking through in 2012. This has a 94% score on Rotten Tomatoes. And I never bring up a Rotten Tomatoes score, but like that one jumped out at me as high as it is.
Right. And like I said, looking for that review that was not positive or not entirely positive, that was a rare outlier, really. The vast majority of critics thought this movie was fantastic. It won a ton of awards from like critics groups and stuff like that, even if it didn't get the Oscar nomination. So I didn't feel like we needed to run through all of those, but it certainly was heavily awarded by various bodies, including the Toronto Film Festival.
And Josh, I don't mean to diminish what you were saying. Maybe you're right on that. I just disagree with this getting into those categories.
All right. Well,
the women talking.
Women talking. We can maybe bring that up later again, but for now, we'll come back and talk more of our general thoughts on Stories We Tell. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 2012, we are talking about our documentary pick, which is Sarah Polley's Stories We Tell. And I feel like we've already gotten a lot of criticisms of this film, but really we should say that we both really enjoyed it. It's a very good film.
Yeah, I really do like it. Michael is a captivating guide throughout. I mean, on screen, obviously Sarah Polley is our guide off screen here. So that's one good thing about it. We already talked about the pacing and kind of how she leads us in one direction. They all thought that their father might have been this actor, Jeff. And then it turns out that it was this producer, Harry, that she met while the woman's name was Diane. That was her mom, while she was away doing a play. But they also did a very good job of setting the relationship, both the love story and the mundaneness that followed of Diane and Michael, to get to that point where she did have an affair, and why Michael wasn't upset with her for having an affair.
Right. I mean, she spends a long time before we even really meet Harry or learn anything about who he is. She really gives us a sense of her own family. She talks about her parents and how they met, that Diane, that they were in this play together, or Diane was saw him in a play, and then later they were in a play together. And so they were both actors in like this Toronto theater scene. That, that's how they kind of came in contact with each other. And Michael talks a lot about what he saw in her and what she saw in him. And then the kids seem to have a lot of really remarkable, I feel like more insight than a lot of people have into the relationship of their own parents, So that was really good as well. And I think even before you get to the quote twist, or before you even know that there might be a twist, it's a really engaging story just about her unique family, and all of the personalities are everyone she talks to. All of her siblings are really charismatic. At least one of them is another actor as well. And so it's absolutely engaging on a personal level, even at that point.
I also like the relationships, like you're saying, with these other characters, how they relate to their parents and, what they see in their parents. And after Diane dies, I think one of the most emotionally effective bits of the movie is talking about how Michael leaned on Sarah to who was just a kid at the time, to help him get through that period, and how close they were, and how he was able to take something so tragic and build something so beautiful out of it.
Right. I mean, their relationship, and another thing that he talks about there, about how close they were during that period, and clearly they're not quite as close anymore, and we don't necessarily know all the reasons for that yet. But there's a sort of wistfulness and a sort of regret to that as well, I think, that comes across, even though they're clearly close enough for her to engage him in participating in this documentary. Clearly, she's close enough with everyone in her family for that. There's no indication, at least on camera, of any of these people being reluctant to participate or to reveal all the things that they reveal. They all seem to be fully on board, really, other than Harry, the biological father, toward the end a little bit. But even when he expresses his own frustrations, he's not walking out. He's never saying he doesn't want to participate in the film or anything. So, clearly all these people are very, very open in general.
Isn't it interesting that the plays that they were doing at the time, or the films that they were producing or watching at the time, mimicked what was going on in their lives, and how they were able to relate that to their romantic stories in real life to what they were doing artistically at those moments?
Right. And I think maybe part of that comes from the fact that, like you said, this is a family of artists to varying degrees. And much like Sarah Polley in making this film, I think they all probably have this internal sense of how their lives are structured as narratives.
I agree. I mean, I think that I get that. I maybe more when I was younger, but as a writer, whatever, a comedian, hopeful filmmaker, whatever, you're always I always used to be oh, this is probably a bad situation to put myself in personally, but I'll get something good out of it, from a content point of view.
Yeah, I mean,
so I'm not saying they did that, but I'm just saying you do get caught up in the cinematic nature of your own life sometimes.
No, totally. And I know that you and I have had conversations like that, where you're talking about some unfortunate situation and saying, well, I'll get a good joke out of this or something. And if you talk about your personal life on stage, like I know that you do, then that is something to think about.
And I'm thinking about it right now.
All right.
Hey, Josh, Dave, Bon Iver, Skinny Love. Come on. Classic, right?
Yeah, I don't know that song, but I don't really know their albums. But
there's it's not a they. This is amazing to me, because Josh and I talked the other day, and I was like, man, I love how she uses the Bon Iver song, because I love Bon Iver. And Josh was like, I don't even know the song, and I'm like, what different world was I living in, where Bon Iver was such a big presence in that scene, and that you guys don't even know it. I thought Bon Iver was this huge star. And it's just me and my bunch of indie nerd friends, I guess, or whatnot.
Yes, it is good.
Justin Vernon.
Yeah, I always like all the Bon Iver songs that I hear. I just have never felt the need to seek it out and listen to the albums or anything.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm saying, Jason, that you're not wrong that Bon Iver is a famous musician or whatever. I just am not.
All right.
I'm just not familiar with his music. It's not the kind of music that I listen to, and so watching this film, when that song came up, I wasn't like, oh, hey, it's that song. Cool that she used that song. I didn't even notice it. I mean, the music was good. It fit or whatever, but it was all stuff I wasn't familiar with.
Well, so I guess what I'm saying on that point is I am a fan of Bon Iver, and I think that was the song that probably most fans maybe got, or, that was the most mainstream song off that first album that kind of broke him, which of course was not the first album. It was the fifth album, but that's the narrative,
the first one
right?
that made it out into the world.
Yeah. Speaking of artists letting life dictate their art, that album was, his girlfriend broke up with him, and then he went into this cabin in the woods of Wisconsin and just wrote this whole breakup album, and that like broke up. But anyway, Skinny Love was one of those songs that was so trendy and hot on like that indie world. You could see like 17 movies probably using it, right? But I guess why I liked it wasn't like, oh, they picked a song that I liked, but I thought it was really effective usage of that song in this film.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you about that. I think all of her choices here aesthetically work. I mean, and as much as I was harping on disliking the sort of obfuscation that goes on in the reenactments, one of the reasons that obfuscation works is because she's incredibly good at recreating what looks like genuine home movies from like the 1970s and 1980s.
Yeah, you use the word wistful. I think she gets that really across really well. So, Josh, how many of her movies have you seen besides this? All of them?
I've seen all of them. And I mean, I saw Away From Her in the theater, and that's from 2006. So it's obviously been quite some time. But I remember thinking that movie was very good. It was highly acclaimed. It's a tough movie to watch, and it didn't really seem like something I felt like revisiting. I didn't much care for Take This Waltz, which is about adultery and I believe is based on a novel, but maybe was also partially at least influenced by things that she was learning about her own life. I thought that movie was way too self-serious, and it didn't really work for me. And as we discussed already, I wasn't particularly keen on women talking. So, I mean, I think this is definitely her best film. And I don't know, it's hard to recreate something like this. I'm sure she doesn't have any other giant family secrets to make movies about, but I wonder if she'd ever have an inclination to make some other kind of personal documentary. I'm sure there's other things, she has 3 children now. I'm sure there's other things going on in her life that maybe she would have something that she would want to share about. And I'd be curious to see that. I definitely think this is her best work.
Yeah. So that's why I was bringing it up, because I like this better than the other movie I saw from her, and I would like to see her explore the documentary space some more. I don't think it has to be personal. I think she's obviously clearly talented enough to tell good stories no matter what she attempts to in this space. But I've been listening to a lot of interviews with her because of Women Talking, and she did a great interview on Script Notes, where, of course, she had starred in Go, John August's first.
Oh, you're co-star in Go,
film.
Jason. That's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, that's right. She and I co-starred together in Go. That's right. Thank you, Josh. But what happened, why she's been out of the spotlight, she's been writing for a long time, but I think she suffered such a severe concussion somehow that she wasn't able to really function day to day as she was before, right? Like bright lights would bother her, or she would get tired. And every doctor that she saw would say to her, like, well, yeah, this is your new life, get used to it, right? And then she went to one doctor in Pittsburgh, and like, well, where all these doctors would be like, she goes, do you think I'll ever make another movie? And they're like, no, but it's a good goal to have, right? Like, this other doctor went the exact other way. And she's like, do you think I could ever make another movie? And he's like, well, you're never going to have a normal life if you don't. So go do it, And like, I think she was saying, run towards the fear is what this doctor kept saying. So that seems to be the personal issue that keeps coming up in all of her interviews right now. So maybe that's the subject she tackles. I think Women Talking, while we didn't like it, seems to have been very freeing for her to showcase that she's able to do these things again and make movies on the terms that she wants to make them. And also now she's back in the spotlight as a director here. So maybe we will see more of her. Also, dude, I know she's not doing it, but like we talked about it in Baron Munchausen, she's a good actress. Like it would be great to see her act again too, So
absolutely. I mean, I remember, and we maybe talked about this in Baron Munchausen, which of course is a movie that she made as a child. I remember me as a child watching her as Ramona Quimby on the PBS series adaptation of those books, and just absolutely, I mean, I loved those books and I loved that version of them. I loved her performance. as Ramona. And yeah, she's a great actor. And even before those health problems that you're talking about, she seemed pretty adamant about not acting anymore, that she was all in on filmmaking, which clearly she's also good at. But it is a shame. And I don't know if she would ever take a role, even a small role, in a film that she directed. I mean, she's not done that. I don't think she's acted in, maybe 15 years or something like that. So, obviously she should not be pressured to do something that she's not interested in doing. But I agree that it is a bit of a loss. But all that stuff you're talking about is really fascinating, in terms of her life experiences over the last decade. And I agree with you that I think any of that could be fodder for a really interesting documentary film if she was so inclined to do so, or even potentially a fiction film that drew from her own experiences in some way.
Yeah. I wonder, look, I don't want to beat up on women talking. I just didn't think it was a best picture nod. Like,
Jason beats up on women who talk.
Which is sadly less violent than what the men do to the women in that
movie.
film.
Yes,
right.
I'm glad that you are less violent than the men in that film.
than the rapey men in the movie. I was making a joke, Josh.
Yes,
clearly.
Yeah.
Look, women talking has some great sweeping shots in there, and it's hard to make just an entire movie, no matter who it is, of people in one room just talking the whole time, right? So
yeah.
Anyway, she's technically a very good director, so I would like to see her do something with a bigger breadth, with more space. And you use the word self-serious. That is something that I feel like I see in all of her interviews and her films. Like, I want a little more sense of humor. Like, obviously, Women Talking, not a funny movie, right? But
no.
I think you were saying that about Take This Waltz, and like, I'd like to see a little more humor injected into some of her stuff.
Right. And I think going back to this film, which is obviously about a very heavy subject and something that is personal to everyone involved and has affected their lives deeply, there is humor here. There is playfulness here. I mean, just the fact that she gets Michael to narrate the story of his own wife having had an affair and had a child outside of their marriage is sort of cheeky, and he himself is a playful figure, Michael. And so, not that this movie is like laugh out loud funny in any way, but I think it does have more of a sense of humor, that she wants to show maybe that she can have a sense of humor about all this crazy stuff that happened to her. And that's something that isn't really present in her other films.
And they even talk about how the whole family would make jokes about this for the years preceding the revelation. And obviously, like, her brother makes some good jokes about it in the interviews and everything. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. Like, she's so talented on so many levels in that idea. Like, this is a weird thing to say, in that idea of like run towards the fear. Like, it'd be great to see her do something so far out of the box of what we would expect from her. I'm not saying comfort zone per se, but just something so unexpected from her. It would be great to see her just tackle a totally different type of project.
Yeah. I mean, but I think, again, to bring it back to this is her working toward all of her strengths, whether she realized it or not when she was embarking on this project, where, like you said, she started without really knowing what form it would take. Everything that she's really good at is funneled through this film, both documentary wise and drama wise. Again, those reenactments, if this had been a fiction movie set in the 70s and 80s that looked like those reenactments, I would feel like, wow, what a really effective period piece. Like, she really captures that time incredibly well and makes it really convincing.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I would love for her to go and do another documentary. And I'm sure when she listens to this, she's going to really take that into account.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. She's busy listening to a lot of podcasts about her film.
Men talking about women talking.
Right. Yeah. That's surely what she was hoping for when making that film. Is there anything else specific about Stories We Tell that you like, or that you want to shout out that we haven't talked about yet?
I'm glad she's Canadian, Josh. It's always nice for me to see the setting of Canada and how she utilizes it.
I did like, speaking of Canada, the discussions of the differences between people who live in Toronto and people who live in Montreal. I feel like something that we as Americans would not really think about. We think of
Right.
Canadians as this like monolithic, entity or whatever.
Yeah, they say like Toronto is all like serious in business, and in Montreal it's more like let your freak flag fly, baby.
Right.
big
It's
country.
I don't know what we would have, LA versus San Francisco or something like that we might talk about here in the US, but we don't think about, we just think of Canadians as one kind of thing.
Right. Well, we're, generalizers.
Yeah, we're bigots against we're celebrating Canada this season, as we said.
Yeah, this is our season of love for Canada. In fact, I wanted you to watch one of the movies Harry produced, which was nominated for a Golden Globe in like 1976 as part of research for this film.
I looked that up. Not that I necessarily would have had time to watch it, but it doesn't seem to be streaming anywhere or really widely available, unfortunately. So didn't get a chance for that. But
I, for research, watched all 11 seasons of Letterkenny.
Yes, that was clearly what you did just for this podcast.
You do that for every episode, don't you?
It's weird. It's so weird. Should we rate this, Josh?
Yeah, let's go.
5 mistaken fathers.
Sure. Let's
or 5 biological dads.
Yeah,
what do you want to do?
Yeah. I mean, no one views this as a mistake. And
it's not mistaken, but I don't mean mistake like that. I mean like someone I mistook for my biological father.
True. Yeah.
So
5 fathers of some type.
Yeah, 5 dads, no matter what how you want to do it. It's 3.5 for me. First watch was a 4. I know we've been somewhat critical throughout, but I think it's weird because we are both so enamored with her talent that we don't want that to escape this conversation. 3.5, very much recommend you watch this movie.
Yeah, I mean, and I think maybe one of the reasons why we're critical in certain areas is because she's so talented and because she does so much really well here that it's like little things that could almost have taken it slightly to the next level. But it is a really good film. You haven't seen it. We've spoiled it for you. But my opinion, unlike Jason's, is that even with the spoiling, it's still a really, really rich experience. I give it 3.5 dads out of 5 now. And that's, for me, the opposite direction. I only gave it 3 when I first saw it. I liked it more this time. But I'm going to agree with you on the rating. So, Dave, how would you rate this?
I'm also going 3.5 along with you guys. If I could just say real quick, because when you guys were kind of going back and forth on the effectiveness of the reenactments being staged and like obscuring that, when the credits rolled on this movie, like I almost felt like that was the point. Like to me, it was like almost like an experimental form of documentary. Like, can we still be as emotionally effective when that is dropped? That hit me more than the revelation of the dad. Like to me, like that was the crux of the film.
So did you not realize during the scenes where it pulls back and shows them filming the reenactments that was what was going on?
No, that's when I realized it and I'm like, oh, okay. And like, it kind of hung over the film more so than the reveal of the dad.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like you didn't understand it until the credits rolled.
No.
Okay. I mean, which is possible.
Josh, we really missed the opportunity here with none of us giving it 2. So I could have referenced My Two Dads, the sitcom from the 80s with Paul Reiser. But anyway, and Stacey Keenan. We'll come back for Act 3 of Stories We Tell.
We'll talk about the legacy of Stories We Tell. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. We're talking about Sarah Polley's Stories We Tell in this episode of our season on the films of 2012. And I feel like we've talked a lot already about Sarah Polley's career, the arc of her career. As we noted, this was the 3rd film that she directed, and then she did not direct another film for a decade until Women Talking in 2022. She did write
because of her health issues.
Right, because of her health issues. She did write but not direct the miniseries Alias Grace on Netflix in 2017, which is based on a Margaret Atwood book that is quoted at the very beginning of Stories We Tell.
I was trying to watch that actually, because, I like those hot limited series about crime and such. Yeah. And that is not available for streaming here in the States.
Oh, that's crazy. That was a Netflix original, I believe. I reviewed it when it came out. So that's Netflix being shady there, taking off their content.
Well, now I'm just going to double look it up to make sure I'm not wrong. But
I
you
mean,
keep
I
going.
believe it. It might have been like licensed from a Canadian broadcaster or something,
Right.
but I think it was labeled a Netflix original here in the US.
Josh, as I have said, I am completely wrong, and it is on Netflix, and I should have watched it. So
Definitely not editing that out. That's
that's fine. You don't have to. I was wrong. I thought I couldn't watch it, and turns out I could, and I'm just a dumb man.
Well, I will say that
Doing dumb man
my
things.
point about Netflix being shady still stands, though.
Yes,
Because,
absolutely.
Yeah.
they've deleted other things. I did see that. Like I said, I reviewed it when it came out, and I was excited for it. But it got a lot of really good reviews. But I believe, kind of disappointed in it. It stars Sarah Gadon, who speaking of Canadians, who we just talked about as one of the stars of Antiviral. So the Canadians are everywhere this season. But Jason, do you want to trash women talking anymore?
Josh, I don't even trash it. I gave it 2.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd, where you could find me at Go for Jason. I just don't think it's a Best Picture nominee, and I don't think it's the most amazing screenplay I've ever seen either. I don't know. The movie, I thought, like, not that this podcast is about that, like, you hit that note and then it just stayed at that note the whole time to me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, we may disagree on the method by which it was nominated for Oscars, but I agree with you that I was disappointed. I didn't think it was a very good movie. Also, visually, it has this weirdly like drab look, which I assume was on purpose, maybe to reflect the plain look of the characters or whatever, but just made it just look ugly and dingy. And that I found distracting. And yeah, I'm with you. It's kind of one note. I was looking forward to it and I was hoping to like it a lot. I was assuming that I would like it, and it just was a big disappointment to me.
Yeah. And do you think that is because you're a man?
Well, clearly.
Look, let's instead talk about other family documentaries with strange dynamics that are worth watching. I put down 3 of my favorites, Josh, which 3 Identical Strangers, about the triplets who were all adopted into different families and didn't know that they were triplets, and then found each other basically on a whim after they grew up. And that was wonderful until it became very depressing, and we learned how terrible people are, which yet again, not those 3 guys, but what the system did to those 3 guys. The Wolf Pack, about these 2 parents who wouldn't let their kids out of the house, so these kids just made reenactments of their favorite movies in the house, and that was a big sensation a few years ago. And Grey Gardens, one of the all-time great documentaries about these 2 rich Kennedy cousins living in the dying days of the glorious Hamptons. Not that the Hamptons have died, but this section and this area and this house, which needs to be cleaned, and just kind of living in the past and the present.
Yeah, I still haven't seen Grey Gardens, which maybe we'll rectify soon. But I'm with you. 3 Identical Strangers is also one of those documentaries with a twist that I find kind of annoying now. I did like that movie, though, quite a bit. And The Wolfpack as well is really good. I noted a couple that I liked a lot. Twinsters, which is a movie like this where the filmmaker herself is discovering things about her parenthood. She is someone she was adopted from Korea, and she discovers that she had a twin who was also adopted, and then they meet each other. And it deals with some serious, darker questions, but unlike 3 Identical Strangers, it is overall like a very positive, happy celebration of these people finding each other. And I also thought about Dick Johnson is Dead, Kirsten Johnson's film recently, especially with the way that she incorporates her own father and has him do these like reenactments of things from his own life in order to process kind of their relationship. And I feel like that's a lot similar to what Sarah Polley does with Michael Polley in this film.
Yeah, none of us watched Senior yet, the Robert Downey Jr. movie about his father that I bet is kind of along those lines as well. Dave, any favorites?
3 Identical Strangers would have been mine. Yeah, it's great. And I think, isn't Ben Stiller making like a limited series out of it now?
Yeah, he is. And I think he's supposed to star, though, as the twins, which he seems way too old for.
He seems old, but he does look like those kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah. Um, I wonder, Jason, about, the documentaries with twists, which I feel like was maybe at the time that this film came out and some others, like when it was a newer thing, it was
Yeah.
something that was more effective, that people were like, oh, wow, you have to watch this movie because it's got this crazy story and the way that it unfolds. I remember, I don't know if you've seen Dear Zachary, but that was one. I mean, that's a really horrifying story, but that was one where they really build on the idea of the twist, and they like really invest you emotionally in someone only to like really like gut punch you with what happened to that person. And that was a movie that was a huge sensation that I thought was a bit overly manipulative.
I didn't watch that specifically because of how just difficult I heard it was to watch, and the reveals are, and just how it gets you like that emotionally. But we've talked about The Imposter probably a few times. Obviously, the Paradise Lost series has some twists that we've talked about before. So
Yeah, but I feel like the Paradise Lost series is about the filmmakers sort of discovering more information as the series goes on. Whereas what bugs
okay.
me is when a documentary starts with like the filmmaker has all the information, but they're going to withhold it from the audience for the sake of a big surprise.
Well, we knew that like with The Imposter, and I think The Imposter is a great movie, right? So
Yeah.
but I mean, that I think that probably became very popular with like Catfish and everything like that.
Right. And I haven't seen Catfish. I mean, a couple more recent ones that I thought of that
Spoiler alert, it's not who you think it is on the internet.
Movies that annoyed me, that I didn't like, even though inherently maybe the story, like the actual events are interesting, but the way it unfolds, I think, these are probably both Netflix original films, Misha and the Wolves, which is about this woman who wrote a memoir claiming to be a Holocaust survivor as a child, and having lived in like the woods with wolves when she ran away from a concentration camp. And it turned out to all that she made it all up. And again, you don't learn that right away in the film. It takes a while. And another film called Tell Me Who I Am, which is about these twins. And one of them is in a motorcycle or car accident and gets amnesia and has to sort of like relearn from his twin all about their background. And that's fascinating in and of itself. But again, the movie withholds that what he is eventually relearning is the horrifying abuse that they suffered as children, and that we get as like a big twist. And so both of those movies, again, inherently, the events that they're talking about are interesting, but the way they're presented really annoyed me.
Yeah, Josh, am I equating Tell Me Who I Am with Three Identical Strangers? Because I remembered that as an element of that as well, but maybe I'm confusing the two. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, in Tell Me Who I Am, they're not adopted. They're twins who grew up together with their parents, and the twin who is in this accident and loses his memory has basically lost the memory of being abused by their parents.
Right.
And Three Identical Strangers, they are all adopted by different families, and I don't believe that they were abused per se. The abuse is more of the system.
The system,
that deliberately
So
separated them. Yeah. So it's a different.
Yeah.
It's people being horrible in different ways.
Yeah.
Really.
So I was right. So I was right about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
hey, how about the Amazing Jonathan documentary? That's another one that kind of like really plays with the form and all that,
And that's one where like he teases like it's a bunch of nothing that he's teasing. I really dislike that movie. Yeah.
What about there was the one about the woman who claimed to be in the towers in 9/11, and then they revealed that she wasn't. Did you ever see that one?
No, I don't know that one. Is that the George Santos story?
Steve Renazizi or whatever, So no, I don't know. So I don't know. There's Josh, you do make a point that like when I first saw The Imposter, it was like, whoa, this is so crazy and everything. And now like, everything on Netflix is like, whoa, this is so crazy, right? So
right.
They are kind of pushing into that territory a lot.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. I think that's too another thing is that if Sarah Polley was trying to make this now, Netflix would probably try to get her to make it like a 6-part series or whatever.
Right. And that would be not good.
No, it would be much worse.
Yeah.
So going back to the people in this film, I mean, as we said, her family, they're all artists. So in addition to being documentary subjects, a lot of the people in this film are in the film industry themselves. Michael Polley, I thought it was interesting. Michael Polley and Harry Gulkin, her two dads, they both died in 2018. So that must have been a very, very rough year for Sarah
Jeez.
Polley. Michael Polley was an actor, and Harry Gulkin, as you said, produced, including the first Canadian film nominated for an Oscar. But I think his producing career ended in the 80s, so he wasn't working after this film was made. Her older brother, John, is a casting director, still works very prolifically as a casting director, including on her films. He was the casting director of Women Talking.
And he had that business with the mom, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah. He kind of took that over, it sounds like, after the mom passed away. Tom Butler, I did recognize in this film. He's one of the co-stars in the play that Diane performed, where she went to Montreal and had this affair. And he's not the one, Jeff, who they speculate might be Sarah's father, but he's another co-star. And I definitely recognized him. He's an incredibly prolific character actor in a ton of things, still working heavily today. And one thing I found kind of interesting that I wondered about with my frustration with the reenactments, that for me as a viewer, I didn't recognize any of those actors in the reenactments, which is part of why you can kind of believe that they're real. But reading that review from the Toronto Star, it mentions Rebecca Jenkins, who plays Diane in the reenactments, as a famous actor in Canada. So I feel like maybe Canadian viewers would have sort of caught on to that earlier.
Something that you didn't.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Josh, that's what you get for not being Canadian.
It's true. That's the theme here, that the Canadians are best, really. So, and she also continues to work as an actor, mainly in Canadian TV and film. So those are the figures that I wrote down. Any other people that you want to talk about here?
Sarah Polley, the director, was a prolific actress and now director, writer.
We have talked about that, indeed. And wrote a memoir recently-ish that we probably talked about this in our Baron Munchausen episode, where she talked about a lot of her experiences as a child actor, including her experience on the making of Baron Munchausen.
Right. And we talked about that. She and Terry Gilliam have engaged and come to some sort of detente about it, where they don't agree, but seem to have mutual respect for each other.
Right. And she had, and I wonder if some of the experiences that she recounts in that book are part of the reason why she's not really interested in being an actor anymore. But I agree that it's a shame. I think, especially if she were to act in one of her own projects and have full control over it, maybe she could find enjoyment in it again.
Right. Well, with Women Talking, in the interview, she was talking about how, she had 10-hour days on set, and there were breaks and mental health breaks if you needed it. And I think she just wants to do it in a more healthy way than traditional filmmaking often leads to.
And I think that's great. I hope she's able to continue to do that and maybe make a movie that pleases these two men here, which is the most important thing.
I, on the other hand, want more gulag-like situations where people are working 18 to 20-hour days and have no mental health breaks, no physical health breaks. Remember, you're there for our enjoyment.
That's if you're thinking of participating in a film that Jason directs.
So fund my movie. No, yeah. I'm clearly kidding, and it's sad that I have to say these things out loud.
Yeah. So that is Stories We Tell, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Tell us your story on online and on social media.
Unless it's boring. I don't want to hear it then, all right? But you can still engage with us. We're at awesomemovieyear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter. I'm Jason Harris Comedy, or Jay Harris Comedy, on all of those socials. You can find eatthiscomedy.com or Eat This Comedy on Instagram.
I have some old stuff at joshbellhateseverything.com. I'm also at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, and at Signal Bleed on Twitter and on Letterboxd. And you can listen to our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
Jason, what are we talking about in our next episode?
Josh, is it your pick?
It's my pick.
Well, Josh, then why don't you tell us what we're talking about on the next episode?
My pick is the sci-fi-ish, I guess we could say, indie film from Batmanglij and Brit Marling. It is called Sound of My Voice. So tune in next time for that. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.